Hello and welcome to Wine This Week with Scott Leek. In this week's episode, we are going to be tasting the Spanish sparkling wine Cava, an outstanding value wine to be had across the board. And we are going to start this episode off with demonstrating the proper, safest way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. All of that coming up next. There's a saying that goes safety first. So we're going to do things a little differently this week and start our tip of the week first, demonstrating the proper, safe way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. Now you might be saying to yourself, Scott, I already know how to open a bottle of sparkling wine. You take it, you put it against your body, and you push the cork out with two thumbs. Unless you're trying to take out the Icelandic snow owl, that is not the right way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. Now, maybe if you're on your back deck and you want to see if you can shoot it over your neighbor's fence, I've never done that successfully. Stupid fence is too high. Anyway, that's not the right way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. Number one, it is kind of dangerous. And number two, it is actually going to quickly remove a lot of the carbon dioxide from the bottle and thus rid you of some of the precious bubbles that make this such an amazing drink. So we're going to try to open this with the least amount of force possible. And the amount of force in there is pretty amazing. So your typical car tire has about 30 PSI or 30 pounds of pressure per square inch. A bottle of Cava or champagne is going to be closer to 90 PSI. That's a little bit more equivalent to the pressure you would feel if you dove in the ocean down 200 feet. And just so you know, without equipment, humans can't go below 60 feet. So yeah, that's an intense amount of pressure. These bottles used to explode before they started making them really heavy and thick. If you've ever noticed, a champagne bottle or a Cava bottle is going to be a lot thicker and heavier than a standard still wine, and it needs to be because of all that pressure. So we're going to spend a little time going over the safest way to open a bottle of sparkling wine first. Number one, before you do anything, this bottle needs to be very well chilled. Well chilled means 45 to 50 degrees. I even think it's okay to get it even colder than that. So putting it in your fridge for a while before you're going to open it, taking it out at 38 to 40 degrees is actually totally fine. And the reason for that is the colder the wine inside, the less pressure there's going to be. I mean, it's not a ton, but it's going to help a little bit. If you notice in the wintertime, going back to the car tire analogy, you're more likely to see this little indicator light on your dashboard because as cold air condenses, it actually is going to lose some pressure. So the colder you get the wine, the little bit less pressure you're going to have in there, making it a little bit safer to open, and it just tastes more delicious when it's really cold. So that's step number one. Step two is you're going to get your key and cut off the foil. Now there's this handy little tab here. Sometimes I find that it's a little hard to find that. Other times it just comes off in pieces. So if you want to do the pull tab, you can do the pull tab. Otherwise, just take your little foil cutter, go all the way around, and we're going to just cut that foil off and peel that off. There we go. So we got this off. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to untwist our cage here. Now, every single cage is going to take 6 twists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. Cage is off. Now, this is important. I think a lot of people screw this up in that they take the cage off. If you notice, my thumb is on top of the cage at this point in time. It's been loosened. This cork could come off at any point. I've seen people set this down, take the cage off, and a hole nearly got put in someone's ceiling by removing that a little too early. The other thing is, keeping the cage on actually makes this a little bit easier to grip the cork and remove it. So keep your finger on the top or your thumb on the top at all times from this point on. Next thing we're going to do, and this is a step that's often overlooked as well, is tilting the bottle at about a 45-degree angle. Now you want to make sure that at this angle you're not pointing it at some pictures or someone you care about or in-laws. You want to make sure that this is safely pointed at something that, if it were to fly off, isn't going to do any damage. But the other reason you're going to put it at a 45-degree angle When it's straight up and down, all those bubbles, all that pressure is going straight up to the cork. By tilting it at a 45, you're now dispersing some of that pressure across the bottle instead of having it all go straight to the top. So that's also going to hopefully help make sure that it doesn't come off violently. Now, if you want to grab a towel or something, it helps. I don't actually like doing it, and I hope I don't have egg on my face trying to open this without the towel. But you're going to actually twist from the bottom. So you got one hand on the top and you're just holding the cork still. You're not actually taking the cork out. You are twisting the bottle, and I can already feel it starting to loosen up on the top. It's starting to come out. And we're just going to do a little tilt down. And it should sound like a nun farting in church. You don't want that loud pop. The more pop, the more gas escapes, the more bubbles you lose. I know it's fun and romantic, and you know what? It's your own bottle. If you want the pop, make the pop. But that is how you should properly and safely open a bottle of sparkling wine. Today's wine is the Freixenet Cordon Negro Brut. And I'm going to talk a little bit more next week in the episode on Champagne about Brut and the dry sweet scale. It's kind of confusing, but the nice thing about Freixenet is that it has on the back this little image showing you kind of a sweet to dry scale, and the arrows all the way down at the bottom showing that this is a dry style. So know that if you're buying a Brut, you're getting a nice dry style. Brut is the most common. Now, this cost $10. This one's $13. I've had this before and I really like it, so it gave me the confidence to try this. I should have probably tried this before. Freixenet is the largest producer of sparkling wine made anywhere in the world at 53 million bottles per year. What it has in common with champagne is primarily the method in which it is made, which is arguably the most important thing for it to have in common. It is made using what is known as the traditional method, the method traditionnelle, method des champenois, whatever you want to call it, it means the same thing. The wine goes through 2 fermentations, and the second fermentation happens in the bottle. So that is the main thing that you need to know in terms of the similarities between Cava and Champagne. Other than that, there's a lot of difference between these. The soil is very different in Champagne than where it is in Penedès, where Cava is mostly, 95% of it is made in Penedès, which is in the Barcelona, Catalonia region of Spain near the Mediterranean. The soils are different, the climates are very different. In Champagne, it's about as far north as you can go in France and the winemaking regions. It's near the 50th parallel, which, as I mentioned in a previous episode, is getting to the point where it's really hard to make wine up there. And it is hard to make wine in Champagne. Whereas by the Mediterranean in Penedès, climate is wonderful. It's a much warmer climate, which also means that for the style of wine, you're going to get a different style than Champagne. The warmer climate, the fruit gets a little bit fuller, a little bit riper, a little bit fruitier, and the wine's a little bit less acidic than it is in Champagne. None of these are necessarily good or bad. They just illustrate the differences. They have been making Cava for a really long time. I think it was 1872 when it was first developed in Spain. That's about 200 years after they started doing it in Champagne, though. Now, one of the things that is also going to make this an easy buying experience for you, they have 3 different levels of Cava designation. So there's Cava, Cava Reserva, and Grand Reserva. And wouldn't you know it, they make it super easy for us by putting this nice little white sticker on every single bottle of Cava. So for the Cava, plain old Cava, it's got the white sticker. The Cava Reserva has a green sticker. Sometimes they're on the cap, sometimes they're on the bottle. You just got to flip it around and look for it. And then the Grand Reserva, I didn't find one, I didn't buy it, but the Grand Reserva has a gold and black sticker. And each has a little bit of a different style, and they're made slightly differently. So the plain old Cava with the white sticker goes through that secondary fermentation and rests on the lees. I'll talk about that more next week in Champagne, but it rests on the lees in the bottle for 9 months at a minimum. That's about the same as it is most other places. All the other Crémants, like Crémant de Loire or Crémant de Limoux in different parts of France, 9 months is about the amount of time it does secondary fermentation. For this one, by the way, this was $20, so even a Cava Reserva can be a great value. But this is going to rest on the lees in the bottle doing secondary fermentation for 15 months. That is how long they do it for non-vintage Champagne. The Grand Reserva is going to be in the bottle on the lees for 30 months. Champagne vintage champagne is 36, but 30 months really is going to round out a unique style compared to these other two. It's going to get way more nuttier. You're going to taste some of that yeastiness, that breadiness, toastedness, almonds, just a very different style. So depending on what you like and what kind of experience you want, know that those 3 levels can help you pick out the right wine for you. All right, let's try some Cava. So this particular bottle that Freixenet produced here uses the 3 primary grapes of Cava. This is 20% Xarel-lo, this is 35% Macabeo, and this is 40% Parellada. So those are the 3 primary grapes that they use in Cavas. In the 1980s, they started to incorporate a little bit of Chardonnay and a little bit of Pinot Noir, but those still make up less than 10% of most bottles, or most vineyards, excuse me. Let's give this a smell. No, sorry. Well, I'm gonna smell it anyway, who cares? Nice. So looking at the color, it's fairly pale. I'm gonna call this straw, maybe pale intensity and lemon to straw in color. I love the bubbles. They're not like crazy super fine, which oftentimes can be a sign of quality, but pretty small bubbles. They don't look anything like you would see in a Diet Coke or anything like that. Good nose, medium intensity in the nose. I'm getting some green apple, some lemon, and a little bit of pear. Not a whole lot of secondary or tertiary notes in this though. Because this is a straight up Cava, only aged for 9 months, you know, you're not going to get much of the almond or nuttiness or toasty or brioche or some of the other flavors that I probably would get in this, in the Reserva, which I'm really excited to have at some point as well. Let's give this a taste. Man, who doesn't love sparkling wine? 10 bones. That's awesome. It is off dry. It's a brut. It should be fairly dry. It is fairly dry, but it's not bone dry. I mean, a brut does have sugar added to it, but not as much as some others. So I'm going to call this off dry. The acidity level is really nice. It's not cut your mouth open, razor sharp acidity, but it just cleansed my palate, just washed everything away. It is just getting me ready for the next bite of food, and that's why I just love sparkling wine. You can pair this with just about anything. Tannins, there are none. Alcohol, I didn't really get any heat on this, and that's not surprising. A lot of Cavas are fairly low in alcohol. I would guess this is below 11.5% alcohol on that. That feels about right. On the body, I'm gonna taste it again. The nice thing about the bubbles, you move it around your mouth a little bit, and it gives this feeling of more fullness and gives this illusion that there's more body than there really is, which is kind of nice. I'm gonna call this medium low on the body, arguably light, but the bubbles just add this extra little layer to the body, which is great. And for a finish, this is really sticking with me a little bit. I mean, it's not a crazy long, I'll call it a medium minus finish, but it's a nice finish. There's nothing about this that's making me just kind of go, ew, whatever. Like, I want more. Every time I take a sip, I want more, and that's what more can you ask for in a sparkling wine. As far as the flavors go, I got more of a yellow apple than a green apple on the palate. I definitely got the lemon. I didn't really get lime on the palate. Maybe a little bit of pear. And again, that's about it. No real detectable nuttiness. Maybe just a hint of some almond in there. No toastiness, no brioche, which I kind of expected with just a plain Cava. I'm gonna score this 6 points on my 10-point scale. Above average, delightful. Cannot wait to have this with food. I'm gonna have kind of a seafood chowder tonight, which is a fairly light chowder. I think this is gonna go well with it. You can overpower sparkling wines, but for the most part, they go with anything. I know people that love drinking California sparkling wine with fried chicken. Because this is Cava and I like to kind of stick to the region, I think the ideal pairing for this would be a lighter Mediterranean fare, some grilled vegetables, some light seafood, maybe some charcuterie would be good with this. You can have this with popcorn. The Spanish drink this at breakfast, they drink it at lunch. You can just sit and sip this thing too. It does not need food, but food would enhance it, and this would enhance the food. It would be just this great symbiotic relationship because it cleanses the palate with each sip, and it just makes you want to have another bite of food and another sip of wine, another bite of food. It's just awesome. Thank you for watching another episode of Wine This Week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a like below and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Add any comments you might have. I'd love to hear from you about what your thoughts are on Cava. Join me next week as we move to the region of Champagne itself. Until then, keep trying new wines. And as always, cheers.